Do you believe in the existence of extraterrestrials? Tell me I'm crazy.
Mulder, you're crazy.
I can't give up. Not as long as the truth is out there. I want to believe.
Welcome to this episode of the X-Files. X-Files with your host Mark and Becky. Hi, Becky.
Hello.
Right, let's have a little song to get us into the next episode. We're basically covering we're still on season 3. We're covering episodes 5 to 8. So here's a little song to lead us into the next episode.
As someday it may happen that a victim must be found, I've got a little list of society offenders who might well be underground and who never would be missed. They never would be missed. There's weightlifters and bodybuilders, people of that sort. Bank robbers who retire to Spain the minute they get caught. Bishops who don't believe in God, chief constables who do. Or people who host chat shows and the guess what's on them too. And customs men who fumbling through your underwear insist. I don't think they'd be missed. I'm sure they'd not be missed. He's got them on the list. He's got them on the list. And they're none of them be missed. They're none of them be missed.
Okay, so episode 5, The List. Written by Chris Carter. Another one directed by Chris Carter. First aired on October the 20th, 1995. What's the List? I mean, this is a prison set one. What was your feeling on this one?
Well, straight away, it had, I thought, Sounds of the Lambs vibe, particularly the way that Scully was kind of lit and her scenes within the prison. And I think the next few episodes that we're going to talk about all seem to be quite centred on kind of thrillers or true crime.
They do. Yes, I agree.
And there's some really interesting developments with her character, I think, in particular. But I think, this came out, like you say, in 1995, in October. So that's on the back of films in 1994, like Pulp Fiction, The Client, Colour of the Night. And I think that kind of thriller, the 90s kind of, typical thriller has very much permeated the series at this point.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there's definitely that noirish kind of vibe as well, isn't it? I mean, Silence of the Lambs is an obvious leading on this one. Now, it's funny that because we kind of got away from Silence of the Lambs, didn't we, for a while as an influence, but it's kind of come back in full force with these few episodes. This also... there's certainly the opening scene, which I thought was really good, actually. The opening scene, terrific. The guy getting electrocuted and sort of... and enunciating these sort of threats and what's going to happen. It partly reminded me of the Green Mile, somewhat. Certainly the electrocution scenes in Green Mile. And it made you think of what a horrible death electrocution is. What a horrible thing to do. So I saw a few influences. Having said that, I'm not sure did the Green Mile come out after this? I've just said it, and I'm just realised, not sure. I think it came out late after 95, but I could be wrong.
I think it was after it.
It was way after thinking about it. I think it was more like 2000 thinking about it.
1999.
I wonder if the Green Mile was influenced by this somewhat. They were very similar scenes.
Potentially, and also Beyond the Sea. And I think this episode, the beginning particularly, kind of picks up where that left off in a way.
It does, doesn't it? This could have been Boggs's execution in some ways, couldn't it? One thing that felt very archaic to me was the hooded executioner, though it becomes just seeing it when you see that initial scene with the hood, it's a bit really they did that, but then you realize, through the story, it becomes apparent that executioners are anonymous, so that makes sense, and I think that sounds real life to me. So that would make sense. I have to say, when I first saw this one, I thought this was going to be one of these soul transference ones. I thought his soul was kind of jumping around a bit and sort of possessing people. And it wasn't quite that, was it? It was something else.
Yeah, I kind of got that vibe initially too.
Especially, there was a particular prison guard who was looking quite sketchy, and it made you feel that he was the dead guy now. It had that kind of vibe to me, but it turns out it wasn't quite that. They love their maggots in this episode.
Oh God!
If it ain't pus, it's maggots or something like that. Good to see Ken Forey. I always he reminded me kind of somewhat of Tony Todd in Sleepless. They had that vibe to it, didn't they? And they look kind of similar, but it was that kind of vibe. Anything else you picked up from this one?
Just to say, picking up on the thriller aspect, how gory, touching on the maggots and, the amount of, we've got decapitation, we've got, headless corpses, bodies in various states of decay. Like I said, coming off the back of films like, not quite, a thriller in that regard, like Silence of the Lambs, but the violence of Pulp Fiction. And that seems to be it kind of seems to be permeating into television, I think, at this point.
Yeah, I think the X-Files was probably a front runner in it.
Yeah.
It certainly made me realise how much, not just this episode, but all the ones we watched here, made me realise how much the X-Files was a precursor to shows like, was it NCIS? Is it?
NCIS, yeah.
I always get that wrong, all right? Or CSI. Because often, when you talk about other shows, it's usually the supernatural ones, like Supernatural and so on, where the X-Files is like seen as a precursor to those strand of shows. But in this, it becomes obvious that X-Files, we forget the X-Files was also a precursor to, more procedural, gory kind of shows. One of which was Millennium, to come. Chris, and you can kind of see that Chris Carter kind of was indulging it. He directed and wrote this, and he was indulging it somewhat. And Millennium kind of lanced that boil within the X-Files somewhat when it split off, though the X-Files never really lost it either.
Yeah.
I have to say this also, there were certain bits of this prison that looked really familiar. There was certainly like a staircase with a sort of intricate bard system on it, which I definitely saw in season 1, and it could have been in Eve. I think it might have been in Eve when they went to visit Eve 6, or it might have been Beyond the Sea, but I definitely had seen it before in the X-Files somewhere.
Yeah, me too. Eve was the one that reminded me of this in particular.
And as you have said right at the top of the show, my notes I've got a note saying this is reminiscent of Silence of the Lambs. So we were obviously singing from the same hymn sheet on that. Head in a can, like you say, maggots everywhere. It's interesting. The coroner says that the first death, he says that the man suffocated or drowned, and said his lungs were full of maggots from a green bottle fly. So that's pretty gross.
Yep.
Yeah. Now, one of the problems I have with this episode is we didn't really get to know anyone sympathetic, particularly that well before they died for whatever reason. Possibly one of the prisoners who was kind of, painted as a good guy, and one was as kind of a snitch, but none of them were particularly likeable, and that kind of I found it kind of difficult to engage sympathetically with them, what was happening to them. It was more a gross out than a sort of horror. It would have been more horror if we'd have got to know them a bit before they died, but we kind of didn't. So I think the one that had the most development was the warden, and he was horrible.
Yes.
Also we get guys getting beaten to death and all sorts. It's like, oh man. Was there anything you liked about it?
What I liked about it, I think, like I said, this is the start of a few episodes that for me really started to explore Scully's character in terms of, I think, the pressures and everything that she internalizes, all of her personal issues about being a woman, working in what is a male environment. And just, it was very reminiscent of Silence of the Lambs. And I must say the lighting in the prison in this episode I thought was fantastic. Some really atmospheric lighting. But that green hue was completely taken straight out of that film. And, she's at one point, she's kind of locked in and has to walk past all of the cells by herself, which is, again, direct reference. But she is really affected by one of the guards, pulls her to one side and has a word with her, but it really does affect her, and she can't wait to get out of there. And it's very, very rare that we see her lose her cool.
Yeah, it's usually when she's put into an odd situation. I remember specifically losing her cool in, oh man, what was the, Irresistible, actually, wasn't it, with Donny Faster? Was it that one? Yes, it was that one.
It was.
She kind of lost the cool there. In fact, she to my mind, she lost the cool way less than I would have done if I were. The bit where she just wanders off in death row and the guard just grabs her. Firstly, it was please don't go wandering off in death row, and then the guy grabs her and said he can tell her something useful. And that kind of there was some poor writing there. It was kind of didn't really play out very well.
No,
but it was more for the atmosphere than the reality, I guess, or continuity or whatever. Yeah, there's some more. I mean, the governor is of these death row prisoners. We're not going to really. It's really hard to sympathise with those without some decent character development. And then they've got to deal with a governor who kind of routinely beats them to death, and no one says a word. And it's like, wow, it's okay. Like I said, Ken Forrest was good. The wife was pretty good. I got no complaints about the acting in this, and like you said, the direction's great. As ever, if there's a weakness, it tends to be the writing in the X-Files, doesn't it? And they did have a problem with that. There wasn't much Mulder and Scully bants either. There was a little, though. Mulder asked Scully, if you had 5 people you want to revenge on, who would they be? And she says, I only get 5. And he's like, I remembered your birthday, didn't I, Scully? There's a bit of that. But, the acting was good. The Walden was good. Ken Forrest was good. And was it Roach? Was it a Roke? I can't remember his name. He was okay. And the skeevy, slimy one that was kind of a snitchy guy was kind of fun. It was interesting that Ken Forrest's character was Parmelli, which sounds an Italian name. It didn't quite fit him, really.
No, and that's the thing. It had a lot of, like you say, I thought the acting was brilliant, but you didn't have, for me, enough time with the characters. This would have worked as a feature-length film because of for me, that the actual writing was quite convoluted in regards to the list and how, the ending kind of played out. It was a bit confusing.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing is, how did this guy actually come back? He read a lot of books and he somehow worked out something. Or was it will? I mean, often with this, it's possibly willpower. It wasn't that clear. And also they threw in this defence lawyer, who was the way of them showing that the wife was carrying on with a prison guard. That was why he was there. And then we see him get kind of suffocated, don't we? And he wasn't likeable either, so it's like don't really care, It was a bit of that. It was kind of interesting. I think one of the problems was Mulder and Scully don't actually do anything in this one. They're more like observers. They don't kind of solve the case, which in a mature way is kind of nice. At the end, Mulder kind of acknowledges that we didn't really solve this. It doesn't add up, I think he uses that phrase. And then we see the governor get his, really, don't we? Because Nietzsche, the guy that dies at the beginning, kind of grabs him from behind while he's driving. He crashes the car. Really effective car crash scene. Yeah. Brutal, wasn't it? Brutal. You really felt it, kind of thing. One of the best car crash scenes I've seen, in terms of realism, and without being totally gross, you kind of felt it, if that makes sense.
Well, completely, and I think it had a lot of great aspects. It was just too much.
Too much going on. It was too busy, wasn't it?
It really was, yeah.
It should have been a list of 3. And the thing is, I got confused about who was on the list and who wasn't.
Exactly. By the end, I was just like, really confused, and with the characters of the lawyer to kind of add, like you say, just kind of progress the plot, that just made it even more confusing.
Yeah, so I think the lawyer was on the only one I was definite on was the apart from the first one, was the governor, really. But once they started saying about who's on the list and who's not on the list, and I want to get out of here, I want to get out of this place, and I'll tell you who's on the list, I don't know who's supposed to be on the list, who isn't now. Apart from the governor, that was kind of obvious. But it had its problems. This one, the tone was nice, and some of it had its moments, but it kind of didn't quite work. It was a fun one, though. As ever with the X-Files, it was kind of fun. I haven't got much more to say about this one. How about you?
Nope.
What would you give this one out of 10?
I think I would give this one a 7.
Oh, you liked it way more than me. I'll give it a 4.
Ooh.
Yeah, I'm mean, aren't I? I think it's a slightly substandard one, though. Like I say, I like the direction, but I had some problems with it. Okay, let's have another little musical break, and have a bit of. This is I'm trying not to be DJ about the music, but a bit of a blast from the past. This one, it just fits this episode so well. But let's have a listen to that and then get into the episode.
Don't even try. Try a little harder. Something's wrong and not naive. You must be strong. Ooh, baby, try. Hey, girl, move a little closer. You're too shy, shy. Hush, hush, I do want to shy, shy. Hush, hush, I do want to shy, shy. Hush, hush, I do want to shy, shy. Hush, hush. Modern medicine for sure.
Okay, episode 6 of season 3, Too Shy. Directed by David Nutter. Yeah. Written by Jeffrey Vlaming. An unusual name, that, Vlaming. And first aired on November the 3rd, 1995. Interesting premise here. Probably new to the world somewhat. Internet stalking, and the dangers of the internet. We all know that now it's kind of a mature thing, isn't it? We're kind of aware of it, and you've got to take a real care. But it's interesting, this episode I think this must have been a fairly new thing, a new thing then, and they kind of explored it, and then quite well. It stood up. It doesn't feel that clunky. It still kind of works. What was your general feeling on it?
Yeah, I thought it was really entertaining. I'd say, a little bit clunky, but it kind of continues, like I say, the themes of the previous episode quite well. Yeah.
It kind of feels like it's riffing on quite a bit on Tombs. It's kind of a similar story to Tombs, though I think it's got enough differences that it's an interesting episode in and of its own right. But it does feel somewhat. This writer watched some of the episodes in season 1 and thought, yeah, that's kind of a cool one, and kind of worked from there. But I kind of it was gross as well. It was properly gross, this one. It starts with a couple in a car, obviously getting to know each other. He's a bit of a smoothie, isn't he? He's looking at a clover neck. She notices he's got a weird skin condition, but she's obviously enjoying his attention, even though she's a bit scared, and then they kiss, and he fills her mouth with disgusting slime. Whoa, here we go. Interesting name. His name was actually Virgil Incanto, and he was knew a lot about Italian Renaissance poetry. He was kind of a specialist on very obscure poetry, which made me start to think this was kind of like Highlander, Immortal kind of vibe. Did you feel that?
Yeah, I really liked that little kind of, strange addition to his character, and that really helped with his, sense of, how old he was and how long he'd been doing this for.
Yeah, he was basically a predator, an emotional predator. Well, it was an actual physical predator. He fed on them, but it was also an emotional kind of. Vampire's not the right word, but he kind of preyed on emotional vulnerability as his way in.
Vampire's quite an interesting take on it, though. This is a different form of vampirism, fat sucking.
Fat sucking. Digesting, yeah, very nice.
That sounds terrible.
I have to say. Yeah, I'm going to edit that bit out and just put it in. Whenever I feel like it. No, he kind of, it was kind of, I have to say that opening scene felt, I keep saying this, but it felt very Millennium to me. There was something very Millennium about it. At some point we're going to get onto Millennium, so we can talk about it more, but it did feel like a lead-in. We see him sort of talking to women online and being very good at it, knowing what they wanted to hear. He'd obviously worked on his art, and he knew what he was doing, which again felt to me like it was kind of going down this guy's been around for centuries vibe. But that never played out fully, did it? Yeah, really.
No, and that was a shame. You know, the fact that he seemed to really take, joy in, because his kind of day job to create an income for himself was it was translating some of these older texts, wasn't it? So I thought it was a really interesting kind of facet to his character that wasn't really explored. Yeah,
it was a shame, really. I can't. What do you think of the main actor in this? I didn't catch his name, but what do you think of his work?
I thought he was brilliant, and I've seen him in loads of things. I think it is Timothy Carhart. I think his name is.
That's right. Yes, it is.
He's one of those faces that I couldn't quite say, his name off the top of my head or what he's been in, but he's everywhere.
Yeah, he's been in lots of 90s stuff. I'm sure I've seen him in 24, say, and stuff like that. I know him I recognise him quite distinctly because he's in a film that basically no one except me has seen. It's one of those movies I really like, but I'm pretty sure that hardly anyone's ever seen it. And it's a goofy kind of sex comedy from the 80s called Party Animal. And it's about this guy that's desperate to kind of get a girl, and he's rubbish at it. And the guy in this is the guy that knows how to get women, and he's trying to give him advice, and this guy's just terrible. And it's a really fun comedy. I really enjoy it. It's got a great soundtrack with the Buzzcocks and stuff. So, but I don't think anyone else has seen it. It feels like that to me because it's really goofy. But he's really good in that too. So I like this guy, and I kind of know him, but he never really hit big, but you kind of know the face. He's that guy. And I thought he was really good in this.
Yeah, great character actor, I think.
Yeah, particularly the final. Well, no, actually, he was good throughout. Good face acting, I'd say. For example, when the landlady knocks on the door, you can kind of what's going on behind his face, even though he's not he's expressionless. She says, "I know what you're doing," and he kind of goes, "Oh, what?" But you can tell his mind's really racing at that point, and he's kind of the cogs are, and then she says, "You're some sort of writer or editor, aren't you?" And all this. What do you think of the old changing tack completely? What do you think about the old detective being shocked about Scully being a lady?
Wow! And again, like I say, in terms of the Millennium vibe, that's how I think it kind of really complements the previous episode. It kind of follows on because of the gruesome murders and more of a realistic turn, to the show. Like I say, the previous episode focused on Scully and touched on, being a woman in her line of work. And this episode, oh my goodness, when he said that, her face. Brilliant, absolutely.
I have to say, I've got a note here, right? I made a note of his lines. I'm not being sexist. I'm just being honest. And I've got a note saying, "The Scully lip curl, very Elvis." She's got an Elvis lip curl when she gets annoyed. You could just see her top lip kind of going. But she does it more subtly than that. It's not a proper like Elvis doing it. It did fit. It look, I've got a note, Scully lip curl. And I bet if I went back to season 1, I could find a few instances there, but I'd never actually give it a name before.
No, fantastic bit of acting from her. And in that one look, she just kind of says everything she doesn't need to say, and it's brilliant.
I just have to say, I have to defend the age here. That really kind of thing didn't really happen in the 90s. It wasn't, maybe the 80s, definitely the 70s. And a bit in the 80s, but that really, there weren't that many. Mate, I don't know, he was quite old. It's kind of, it didn't feel representative of the 90s for me, that bit. Though I kind of liked it, and I kind of because I liked the way Scully dealt with it.
Yeah, I mean, touching on, like I said,
She wasn't phased, was she? She wasn't like, oh, what am I? It wasn't like, there was no level, was there? Maybe he's got some sort of point, or her feeling like knocked back by it. It was more like, oh, God, here we go.
Yeah, I don't know, like, touching on again, how these couple of episodes in particular seem to be, resonating with thrillers that were out at the time, particularly thrillers in the early 90s in which the killers were female. Things, I don't know, maybe it's touching on things like that in popular culture, in regards to female cultural icons like Scully, because there weren't really many interesting incarnations, I think, of strong female characters, whether they be killers or heroines, like particularly in the way that she is an analytical thinker, a logical scientific character. And the fact that these murders are very much kind of focused on female victims, I don't know, it just seems to be a culmination of a whole random kind of set of themes that are relating to popular culture, and in the 90s, the way that women, particularly within thrillers, like you say, NCIS and things like that were kind of popping up. You have these strong female detective characters as a result of, Silence of the Lambs, and maybe it has something to do with that.
Yeah, possibly. It's kind of interesting because, I mean, Scully's like a very... We've talked about it before. Scully's kind of culturally quite important and significant character, and not that many came before her. You get the goofy ones like Charlie's Angels, but you also get the more serious ones like Cagney and Lacey, say. But Scully was like of a different class to those, really, a sort of intellectual approach. But it's kind of interesting seeing this juxtaposed against this guy from like almost like a previous age, and she's not. She's no shrinking violet when it comes to dealing with... She's not rude or obnoxious about it. It's just a case of... you could see the look at her face. It's not like, oh, this guy, what? It's more like... It's weariness almost. But also a little... Quite contempt. Quite a quiet contempt coming from her. It's kind of fun.
I think as well, though, just like touch on Cagney and Lacey, that we mentioned in regards to the previous episode that, the mainstream television here and X-Files is a forerunner in that aspect, is becoming quite violent at this point. And maybe it's, a lead female character investigating these, kind of violent crimes, particularly against women. But Cagney and Lacey didn't have that level of violence, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it was much more traditional sort of, drama, wasn't it? It's interesting. I'm trying to figure out why the writer put it in. I think it's interesting. I think it might, it could be gratuitous in the sense of you could take it out and it doesn't particularly add, but maybe it does. It's interesting. I'm kind of glad he put it in because it's interesting to see. It's definitely one of these. It's a bit like when you see, it'd be almost like having a random racist, you know what I mean, or homophobe that had nothing to do with it. It kind of makes more sense when it has something to do. I can't figure out if this guy has something to do with it, because like you say, it's violence specifically perpetrated against women in this one. But to be honest, when it comes to serial killers, it's usually women, isn't it? That's the...
But the fact that you have a female investigating, and he said, I'm worried about your approach to this, that, you're going to be affected emotionally, whatever, because you're a woman, and that you can't make, an executive decision or, a clear-minded decision because specifically you're a female. So it's the fact that, she's elevated to that position, investigating these violent crimes as a woman, and that violence that she's kind of looking into isn't really catered to in previous examples of women in these kind of police procedurals and things that have kind of preceded this. So that's how I took it, because like I say, at the time there were a lot of films, the 90s thrillers, that were obviously quite violent. I mean, Seven came out in 1995, and it seemed to be building on that for me. I just thought it was a really interesting commentary, like you say.
I like the fact also, I think this is a clever bit of writing, Liz, before all of this, before we get into it, I'm worried about you, how you'll be affected. His first initial reaction was, "You're a medical doctor?" Which belies is not just he's worried about how she'll be affected. It's the fact is he can't believe she's qualified or able to do this kind of stuff. You know, which is quite patronising, really. But also, he then justifies it by being worried about. You know, it felt more like he was trying to backtrack and justify his unacceptable comments, really.
I mean, if this was in the, absolutely the middle of nowhere, it would make more sense. But, it's in the middle of, I'm guessing, I can't remember off the top of my head, but, a city. It all seems to be kind of set somewhere really kind of populated.
Yeah.
So it doesn't, I don't know, it's just a really funny one. But I just thought it was interesting to kind of talk about.
I think there's some interesting stuff about emotional one of the things that does distinguish this guy, I've said this is kind of riffing on Toombs. One of the things that definitely distinguishes this episode from that is this is about emotional manipulation, where Toombs isn't. He's just hunting. He's a predator. This guy is. He's a physical predator. He goes and Toombs I'm talking about, goes and gets what he wants. This guy deliberately targets a certain type and goes for it. Though there is also, actually, time back to the Silence of the Lambs, he does kind of he kind of wants big women, big and beautiful. He's in a chat room called something like Big and Beautiful, for example. Which it ties back to Silence of the Lambs, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah, quite heavily. Let's move on a bit. And I think we'll certainly pick this up as we go through this episode. There's a bit where Scully goes to examine a woman's body, and it's basically disintegrated into a mushy puddle, isn't it? Which is kind of gross and funny. I did laugh. I felt bad, but I did laugh. I think we see her four-leaf clover necklace. We saw him kind of twiddling with at the beginning when they were like in the car together. So we know that's that woman's basically been disintegrated. So that was kind of interesting. And Mulder goes and talks to her friend, who tells her about this cool guy called Too Shy, who wrote all this great poetry and stuff like that. And they somehow backtrack that he used to use like Lonely Hearts columns instead of online stuff from a preview. So he's been around for a while, isn't he? And that references, actual Lonely Heart serial killers as well. And I don't know about that in true crime. I presume that's a real thing.
Well, yeah, like Raymond Fernandez and Martha Beck, I think in the 1950s, were known as the Lonely Hearts Killers.
Was that the Honeymoon Killers? Or was that different?
I've only ever heard them referred to as the Lonely Hearts Killers, but maybe.
There's also comments about the woman, firstly it's a chat room called Big and Beautiful, and she had a weight problem. She put weight on, and she uses a very telling phrase. He knew exactly what to say, but she still seems charmed by it. That's the weird thing.
The interesting thing I picked up on was that I think it's the roommate of the first victim says that she has copies of the letters because they were so wonderful, which makes you think that she's kind of, they were that amazing, he really knew what he was kind of talking about, and he's got this history with, literature, but that she's kept them for her own personal use, if that makes sense.
There was another phrase that made me laugh. Oh, he wasn't interested in sex. I thought, that's sweet.
Yeah.
That made me laugh. Moving on from that, Scully realises the bones have gone soft, which is kind of that happens to bones, I think, if they're put into acid. She says the goo that she was covered in was basically stomach acid and digestive enzymes. Which, Mulder then sort of checks the weights, and there's 40 pounds disparity. So he posits that the 40 pounds of adipose tissues has been sort of digested. So they kind of get onto that tack. They're not really arguing about this, are they? They're kind of working together and sort of leapfrogging to the next conclusion, stuff like that. There is a little argument, I guess. And then there's come up with a weird line, which is they say scorpions regurgitate their prey, but you don't get many scorpions on the internet. Weird. I like the fact that Mulder at one point says, I'm going to call online services to put out a warning for big women in Cleveland or something like that. It's like, yeah, I wish I could phone up online services. What the hell's online? What does that mean? You know, I guess it's a euphemism for what was the big thing? America Online or something like that, or what used to be a main dial-up service, but it's kind of funny. And then the woman who's like the focus of his attention at this point, her friend goes and says, "There's been an online warning for big women about this date." And she's not that big.
No.
She's kind of normal looking. And she says, I'm scared enough about going to stay without you telling me it's Charles Manson. But she doesn't turn up in the end, does she? Kind of. And he needs his fat, doesn't he? He needs his bit of fat. He's getting, his skin's going to pot or whatever. He needs something.
Which is quite interesting in terms of the timing, because like with Tombs, we had a specific cycle of quite a few years.
30 years, wasn't it, or something?
In between, yeah. Whereas here, I mean, he obviously invests a lot of time in the emotional aspect, which, picking up on what you said before, because, they're talking, a few of the women mentioned, we've been talking for, a month, 6 months, whatever. He's spending a lot of time talking to all of these different women. So I'm wondering what his kind of cycle is. Yeah,
I mean, it's definitely this is not a particularly thinly veiled allegory of grooming, isn't it? Really, and this was before grooming was a big thing. I'm gonna guess in that way. As you say, it's picking up on real life Lonely Heart stuff, but it's kind of interesting it was done that way. But he's obviously setting out, I presume he's got a dozen more along the pipeline that he's kind of sort of setting up relationships with online, would be my guess. So when he doesn't turn up, he doesn't know what to do, so he goes to prostitute alley pretty much, and we see all these prostitutes like soliciting guys in cars, and it felt a bit 80s movie kind of thing.
Yes.
But I don't know about these things. It just felt a bit like, I don't think that happened in real life, but I don't know. So he's looking for all these like women, and he finds a fat one basically. But it's kind of funny. She does want to kiss him, and he's not sure what to do, so he basically forces her. But while they're fighting, struggling, she scratches off the back of his hand, or part of the back of his hand, doesn't he? And part of her face gets dissolved off. It's kind of pretty gross, really. In the meantime, Mulder recognises, we get a touch of this thing that is often not commented about in this season, that Mulder's a genius, and knows loads of stuff. He goes on about...
It really isn't.
Say again?
It really isn't. That's kind of just dropped, isn't it?
Yeah, but in this, he says he basically recognises the obscure Italian poetry, doesn't he? So from that, he works out as part of his profiling. I mean, another thing that's often dropped is Mulder's profiling skills. That isn't mentioned that much, but he says the man's a scholar, professor. He knows about this stuff, and he also says there'll be a scar on his hand because they find this poor woman whose face is part dissolved. They do find skin under his fingers and start trying to match it. In the meantime, our fella gets, our bad guy gets a message from the woman to meet again. She says she's really sorry. The landlady, it's interesting, the landlady's flirting with him, but he's really not interested at all, is he? I think he's a controller, or his nature, the way he does things is he needs to control it fully. So he can't deal with anyone actually, not doing it back, but sort of approaching him a different way.
Yeah, interesting dynamics.
And then we get she's got a blind daughter who really doesn't do much. For the plot. In fact, I didn't realise she was blind in the first scene. Did you?
No, not straight away.
First season, where she basically says, "Oh, you shouldn't be so rude." Now, I didn't actually catch. I didn't think she was rude at all. I thought she was just talking. I didn't quite understand that scene. Got to be honest.
I think just her mum kind of pissed off because she didn't get away.
Yeah, didn't sort him out or whatever. And she's, oh, don't be so rude to Mr. So-and-so, me incantato. She says, but he smells gross like dish soap. So there's obviously soap is made from fat. So it's some sort of, she's picking up a smell from this guy that other people are noticing. But personally, I don't think dish soap smells that bad, but there you go. He sounds gross like dish soap. I think soap's fine to smell like, to be honest. It's better than not having any soap. At this point, Mulder then speculates we got, or actually earlier on, that we might have a genetic mutation rather than a serial killer, this dissolving fat and possibly needing it. So, again, it harks back to Tombs a bit. Then the old detective crops up again, finds Mulder and Scully, and he says to Mulder, I think he says something to Mulder like, you need to brief these detectives, and Scully says, yeah, I'll do it. And he the old dude looks kind of, you, a woman? Kind of, but basically all these detectives go knocking on doors, but Mulder's sort of said, scratch on the hand, worth keeping an eye out for. And then the old dude actually knocks on the door. We get a bit of a switch, don't we? We see Scully knocking the door and the door open. We think it's going to be the killer, but he's not. But then we see the old dude knock on Too Shy's door, and he notices the bandages, and Too Shy notices his hands being looked at funny. So that raises his suspicion. And then they notice the old guy, whose name's Cross. Sorry, I keep calling him the old guy. Cross is his name. Hasn't checked in, is not answering his phone. And I think Scully makes a sort of sarcastic comment about him. But I can't remember what it was, to be honest. Anyway, the second date occurs. So this is right, the second date occurs. She notices his skin condition. He goes, it's eczema. He's a smoothie, this guy. And then they're in the car, and he's trying to get her to go up to the room. And it's kind of funny. He notices there's a shadow in his room. He says, oh yeah, maybe you're right. It is a bit late. Oh, good night. And just leaves it. Wow. And then he catches the landlady who smelt something weird and finds the semi-dissolved detective. So she's a goner too, really.
Which again is keeps kind of harkening back to the Sounds of the Lambs with the inversion of like you said, the opening of the door and it's not who you expect to the body in the bathtub. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I hadn't put that together. Yeah, absolutely. And then the daughter comes looking for her mother, saying Mr. Encanto, Mr. and all this, and then she kind of hits a case, doesn't she? Says, I've got to go to New York for a few days or something like that. But the daughter can smell her mother's perfume, doesn't let on, and calls the cops. So that's why she's there, for that little bit, really. It seems they could have been, I don't know, could have been a different way of doing that. Why she was blind for it, well, I don't know. I guess not seeing the corpses, I don't know. Anyway, then they get, basically, because the daughter calls the cops, it gets to Scully. They find his computer, but it's been wiped, and they kind of recover the files, but they've been password protected. And then he goes to the woman's house. She lets him in. He basically talks his way in there, doesn't he? She's a bit hesitant, but he talks his way in. She goes to change. Again, we see she's not big or anything. She's like a normal woman. It's a bit odd, that. And she emails her friend down the hall that the guy's with her. And there's a line that made me laugh. I don't know if it was deliberate or something like that. And she gives him a coffee and says, would you like milk? I've only got non-fat. And he kind of goes, nah, this is fine. Like, ooh, I don't want it. It hasn't got fat. It's kind of, I think there was a little in-joke there. And then she starts getting a slowly downloading picture of the guy that comes, takes its time. That reminded me of a Kevin Costner film called No Way Out, where there's this software decoding her face. So really slowly, it kind of made me think of that. And then he just walks in and asks what she says, I haven't changed yet. It's getting creepy, really creepy at this point. It's like, And then he sees, she doesn't realise, but he sees a reflection of the screen she's looking at and sees his own face. And he starts going, you look beautiful, and all this creepy stuff. It's like, worst date ever. And then he, I don't know, does the slime thing on her. Doesn't it? And then there's a big fight, and I kind of like the end resolution. She gets shot. The woman who's been attacked and kind of disfigured by him gets to shoot him.
Yeah.
Oh, I've just realised Mulder disappears because he sees a guy running away, but it turns out it's some vagrant. So Mulder's kind of drawn away, and Scully and this woman are left to deal with this guy. Scully don't mess around here. She gets some scissors and starts stabbing him, but he's about to snot on her face kind of thing. And the other woman shoots. Again, it reminded me of the Tombs, the bit in Tombs where he pulls up Scully's shirt to stick his hand into her chest or whatever it is, liver. It kind of reminded me of that. And then we get a shot to a week later. He's in a cell. He's in a right mess, isn't he? And then Mulder asks him about 46 disappearances, and he says, yeah, that was me. Doesn't even look at the painting. Yeah, I did all those. And the makeup was pretty good. What do you think?
Yeah, that was really good in this. Like you say, it's a gross episode, and I really like the way that, because it's a digestive enzyme at the end, when the woman who survives shoots him, like she's got all the burns on her face from the kind of, residue that's been left on her. But the ending, because he's kind of his body's kind of failing him so quickly, again makes me think, how often would he have to replenish? This isn't a monster like Tombs, it seems, which it takes, he can have so many whatever he needs, he can take that, and then that will sustain him for so many years. It seems like this is a guy who, like a vampire, constantly needs that body fat that he doesn't have, otherwise he's literally going to break down.
I kind of like that. I would have liked a bit more if Mulder had sort of made a point of, well, this happens every 2 months, or do you know what I mean? Or he could have said there's also a string of these going back to the 19th century. You know what I mean? That would have been kind of a cool thing, but it doesn't go that way. It just doesn't go that way. I do like the fact that Mulder just leaves Scully in the room with this guy. They can snot on women and digest them. Yeah, just leave her there. That's fine. But there's some great dialogue at the end, which I quite like. He says, "What? I think Scully's asking why he does it, and he says, you see a monster, but I was just feeding." And Scully comes right back. You weren't just feeding on their bodies, but on their minds too. And he says, I just gave them what they wanted, and they gave me what I needed. And that's kind of cool. It's kind of a bit of cool dialogue, and he quotes some Italian poetry at the end, and he says, the dead are no longer lonely. So he's basically self-justifying what he did by saying, they were lonely anyway. I'm just putting them out of their misery. It was kind of that. Kind of cool. Nice final shots. It kind of reminded me a bit of I don't know why, The Fly. Well, The Fly. It's kind of obvious. Yeah,
with the makeup.
Just digesting stuff. And regurgitating digestive enzymes and all that sort of stuff. There was a touch of that about it. I kind of like this one. It wasn't great, but I kind of liked its bit. It didn't quite, the bits didn't add up to the sum of the whole, if you know what I mean. It didn't build to something bigger than it was, but it was pretty cool. I kind of liked it. And I feel it's more than just a retread of Tombs, really. It's different enough. I haven't got much more to say about this one. Any thoughts? Final thoughts?
Just to say that, in addition to the kind of gross out aspect and the gore, that he also, with that kind of end scene and the emotional attachment he seemed to have and prey on, that he was also kind of like a psychic vampire as well as a fat-sucking vampire.
Yeah, he was.
And I thought that was a really nice dynamic.
He had to control. It was basically allegorical to sort of psychopathic control that some serial killers do, wasn't it? In some ways, he's got to defeat them emotionally as well as take that fat. you know, because he could have just gone around looking for fat women and attack, you know, like he did with the prostitute, which he did out of desperation in the end. So he could do it that way, but he chose not to.
Yeah, that's a really interesting ending. Yeah.
What would you give this out of 10?
8.
I give it a 7. I wouldn't argue with an 8 score though. I think there are better episodes, but I really like this one, and it's one of those ones that I thought about a lot afterwards, and I didn't think I would. If that makes sense, it felt more throwaway than I thought it actually turned out to be. Let's put it that way. It wasn't as throwaway as I thought when I first watched it. So yeah, it's a good solid one. Okay, let's have a little break there. Have a bit of music, and then we'll get on to the next episode.
Here's a dance that you can do. Just walk. Oh, you walk. Come on and walk. Everybody walk. You just walk. Come on, let's walk. Well, I know you've heard of the Texas Highway. I know you've heard of the old fire.
Episode 7, The Walk. Directed by Rob Bowman, you know, good old X-Files steady hand there. Written by John Shibben. First aired on 10th of November 1995. Firstly, I don't understand the name. I don't get why is it called The Walk? I don't get it. Is that a military term for a? I don't know. I can't work it out.
Is it the astral projection and the fact that the killer in it, has lost all of his limbs, but he's walking through?
Don't know.
That's what I think.
I don't know what it means. I couldn't work it out because it didn't mean anything. I was trying to think: is it like a term of being in country or something like that? You know, when you're. I don't know what it meant. It started with this guy. A doctor interviewing a guy, talking about the fact he tried to commit suicide 3 times in 3 weeks, and assuming it must be a cry for help rather than a genuine attempt. Terrible psychiatrist. Most unsympathetic doctor you've ever seen in your life. Just terrible. And then the guy explains, well, I'm not allowed to continue this. And so the doctor just wonders, you tried to commit suicide 3 times, I'm off. The door's open, they'll be fine. So the guy walks out, starts wandering around this place, and it looks really good, but it kind of logically, it's like, what's going on here? And I couldn't work it out. Was he in a gym or something? Because he turned up the heat on this tub, then loaded weights into his pockets, and then got into a boiling tub of water. It looked like, right?
I took it to be like a place. For recuperation for military men who've been wounded. Yeah. So helping them with building up the muscles, or like with the sort of
gym thing, wasn't it?
Yeah. But it really did remind me of Halloween 2. This scene.
Yes. Good point. Yeah. Nice catch. Moody looking room. I'll tell you, for what was supposed to be a gym, it was like properly. It looked like something out of Blade Runner. Dark with like beams of light and all this. It was kind of horrible though. A guy getting into a boiling. It made my flesh absolutely tighten up. It's like, imagine doing that. That must be so painful. And of course, he locked the door, but it was unlocked, was it? It then unlocked itself so people could get in to help him. I'll tell you one thing I liked about this was the way Scully dealt with the military. She didn't mess about, did she? When they turned up and they said, the general said you shouldn't be on this case, this is a military matter. She says, okay, who do I talk to if I want to investigate the general? And like the captain said, investigate what? He said, and Scully's like, whatever. I'm not taking your shit. It got me thinking about this because Scully seemed very comfortable dealing with military sites and not taking any shit from them. She didn't buy all of this front. And it got me thinking, oh, yeah, that's because maybe her dad's in the military, so she knows what all that's about and suffers no nonsense about it. Which I thought was, if that was intended by the writer, that's a great bit of continuity.
Yeah, I really thought that.
Yeah, I really like this. We see a guy that I know from Sex and the City who's played by an actor, Woody Garson, as this nervy porter type. And immediately I saw her, I thought Sex and the City. Which is actually, and then that got me thinking, okay, Scully's a great archetype for women. And then we got Sex and the City. I know, I didn't really want to pursue that line of thinking. That's for another podcast sometime. And he basically sees, he takes the surly quadriplegic who's got the name Rappo to a help group who's going on about how these guys are just whining about his situation. No one really understands him and all this. Really angry guy. I have to say, I thought the special effects on this were really good. They did look, I don't think he was a quadriplegic, but man, I couldn't tell.
No, I thought the effects in this were really good in this episode.
I'm pretty sure a lot of people, specifically in that scene where he was saying about them whining, were real quadriplegics. But
yeah,
I don't know what they did, but I thought he was a quadriplegic. I thought they just found a quadriplegic who was a really good actor. But no, I think he was an actor who was made to look like a quadriplegic, in fact. So Mulder's got to go meet the general, who tells him nothing's going on, and again Scully's kind of, well, that's your opinion, man. It was kind of like that. She said, that's your conclusion, General. It made me laugh. It made me think of The Big Lebowski, that's like your opinion, man. And then she says, there's similar cases already happened. You haven't linked them. So there's something going on. But basically, I think she tells Mulder she thinks the general's just trying to protect her men, really. We get a bit of Gulf War syndrome mentioned, so picking up on the cultural vibe. I like the general. I think it was a good actor. What do you think? Yeah,
I thought so. He had that kind of sense of loyalty, but he was starting to experience the supernatural aspects and the way that we kind of... more so, I think, than in the first episode we talked about today, you do get a sense of these characters. There are less characters, I think, in this episode than in the first one we talked about, because I think, like we said with the list and everything, it was just too many people. But you do kind of get the background stories here, and it's quite sympathetic. You really do feel for them all by the end.
Yeah, I think the general on this was very well written, actually. Much less stereotypical military type.
Yeah,
he listened to them when they started telling him things that made sense to him. He didn't like, oh, that's just nonsense. He was like, I think at one point Mulder says, is there anything unusual happening? He kind of paused and he said, well, what do you mean unusual? And started telling her about, he thought he'd seen this silhouette and stuff like that. I thought it was kind of good. In fact, we see a bit where the general dismisses the captain, this lady that's, he's kind of PA, as it were, and says, look, he says, you're dismissed, Captain. Please go relax. It's kind of, he's fatherly, isn't he? He's fatherly towards her. But then he thinks he sees the silhouette, and he hears this voice say, it's your time has come, killer. It was kind of interesting. I kind of like this spooky soldier stuff. They've already done this in the episode Sleepless, haven't they?
Yeah.
And less so maybe there was an episode called Fresh Bones, a voodoo episode, but Sleepless, this definitely reminded me of Sleepless in some ways.
Yeah, me too.
And it also made me think of a film from I think it's early 80s called House, which involved a vet coming back from Vietnam and being troubled by, possibly ghosts in a house. It was kind of a horror stroke comedy, more horror than comedy, I think. It was kind of cool. It kind of reminded me of that. And then we get a rather good swimming pool sequence with the captain's sort of swimming in the pool alone. Again, moody lighting, not very well lit, the pool's lit and the rest of it's dark. Did that remind you of anything?
No.
I'm trying to lead you on to it's cat people. Cat people. The swimming pool scene.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, but there was one touch to it I thought was really good, which is we see the shadow, because the pool's underlit and it's dark, we actually see her shadow on the ceiling, and she's doing like a backstroke so she can see her own shadow. But then we see a shadow coming towards her, converging on her, and she kind of freaks out because she thinks someone's in the pool with her and sort of stops, looks around, there's no one there. I thought that was really good. I mean, especially where effects weren't perfect. It was kind of a bit lumpy, but it was really good. And then she
really effective.
And then she actually gets attacked by something in the pool, which I thought the special effects were really good. Actually, it really worked for me. So that whole swimming pool thing reminded me of Cat People. Also reminded me of a very recent film called You're Next. Where there's a bit where some weird supernatural thing is following this girl, and at one point she tries to trap it by being around a swimming pool.
It follows.
Sorry, It Follows. You're right.
Yeah.
It Follows. I always get those two confused. No, because of the titles. It Follows. You're quite right. It follows. Ugh. She basically dies, doesn't she? But there's like marks around her neck. They're clear fingerprints. You can see finger marks around her neck. And at that point, that's when they say to the general, and Mulder says, is anything out of the ordinary happening? And he sort of says, what do you mean out of the ordinary? He tells about the silhouette and the weird tapes. And then we get Willie creeping around the house, which is odd. And Willie's declares himself the postman, doesn't he? And there's weird stuff with... Well, we'll come to that. But then we see the guy that burnt himself up at the beginning in this like plastic mask, and makeup's really good on this. What did you think? Oh, it was really rather fine. Did it work for you?
Yeah, it really did, and I thought he was a great actor.
He certainly acted through that makeup quite well. Yeah. But the burned guy sees Rappo the quadriplegic, and we obviously see, it's some sort of recognition and sort of horror of what's going on there in the burnt guy's sort of face. They know that basically Mulder and Scully know that someone's been in the house, and we've already seen, as the audience seen, it's Willie. I can't call him Willie. His name's Roach, actually. It's Willie Garson. Yeah, it's a Willie Garson. Sorry, I'll try and call him Roach at this point. And they get some prints, and I think boot prints and fingerprints from the house. Find it's Roach, and arrest him. And then we get a quite harrowing scene of a boy, I think it's about 8 or 9, playing in the sand pit, and a shadow falls across it. So it's like, but then it's a soldier assigned to sort of look after him. And does the soldier go for a smoke or a drink or something? Can't remember.
Yeah, he goes for a smoke. And
this kid who's playing sort of soldiers in the sand pit is in a big trench in the sand pit. The sand starts falling in on him, and the kid gets killed. Basically, quite unusual for TV.
I wasn't expecting that.
No,
yeah,
I thought he'd be rescued.
Yeah.
So he got killed. Anyway, they got Roach, and they're saying, why did you kill this kid? I think at this point, I could be wrong on the timelines, but I think they're asking about the kid and other stuff. And he says, I didn't kill anyone, I'm just the mailman. And when they take his room, they uncover these loads of envelopes in a drawer covered in ants for some reason.
Yeah.
Why ants? I don't know. To denote they just stuck in a drawer. I don't know. They go and talk to Rappo, don't they? Because he kind of gets finger pointed by Roach. And we get Scully's Elvis lip curl here. When she's talking to him and he's got a chip on his shoulder. And then Willie starts screaming in his room that he'll die and stuff like that. And then they find him dead. He's kind of got a blanket stuffed down his throat. At this point, Mulder starts talking about astral projection. And Mulder suggests the letters that Roach had to pick up will come as kind of a psychic connection. That's a plot hole, because if you've not received the letter, how can it have a psychic connection to you? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I thought it was a bit. Yeah.
That doesn't work, does it? Because you wouldn't have got the letter, so therefore you've got no connection to the letter. If you sent it, maybe. So that was a bit silly. But what am I talking about? It's an episode about psychopath. Anyway, the general sees Rappo in his house, but with his arms and legs, and there's this issue, his wife's grieving about the loss of their son, because the little boy's the general's son, and she comes up with a very honest sounding line. She says something like, "I don't want to get over it."
Yeah.
And she's dead at this point, and then we see the general get the gun, and then go talk to the burnt up guy who basically fingers Rappo, doesn't he? He says it's that guy. The general goes and sees him. Rappo basically wants him to shoot him, doesn't he? This is a proper revenge story. This is Rappo really is fueled by rage, which I think is the how he got his powers. I can't remember. Is that ever explained in any way?
No, again, just that kind of sense of willpower, quite in a similar way that it's not really explained in the list.
Yeah, another episode this reminded me of that was that horrible one where the woman got raped by the ghost thing. It was, I can't remember the name of the episode.
Was it Excelsis Day?
Excelsis Day, yes, well remembered. It reminded me a bit of that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, because of that, this felt a bit of a retread. That we keep having this psychic revenge stuff, don't we? It's becoming a bit repetitive in the X-Files at this point. But having said that, this had enough in it to make it worthwhile, I think. Anyway, the general doesn't succumb to this revenge and just shoots above his head and leaves him. But meanwhile, the burnt-up guy creeps up to his room, and we get this kind of cool thing of the general and Mulder getting attacked in the basement by the astral body and there's steam and stuff like that, isn't there? But while all that's happening, Rappo's doing his rapid eye movement coma thing, but the burn man suffocates him, doesn't he?
Yeah.
There was one thing in this episode that was like, what's going on here? Mulder pulls out some dental plates and says, look, when this stuff was happening, he's got these plates. You think, does he carry that all the time? And this is the one case he's actually useful. What was that about? It was really weird. And it wasn't needed either, to be honest. Yeah. Any other thoughts on this one?
It was an interesting approach, but like you say, it did kind of just tread a lot of old ground, really. There was nothing new, and there were, quite a few plot holes. And also, while the kind of effects were great in a lot of the scenes, the ones of, for example, in the sandpit, we see a kind of soldier's or a man's body in the sand, kind of, falling onto the boy, smothering him, and things like that, and the outlines of figures in the smoke in the basement, in the steam, I thought were a bit, weren't great.
I thought they were quite good. I quite liked it, to be honest.
But maybe it was my copy, it just didn't look.
Yeah, I thought it looked okay. I think I watched it on Blu-ray as well. I was quite impressed that it still kind of stood up, and I like the whole vibe of it, actually. One thing I thought was really interesting is we've talked about this is probably more important when we talk about the next episode, but it's interesting that Scully that's the one that's kind of more empathetic towards the soldiers and the men, whereas Mulder feels more empathetic towards women. It's kind of interesting, that thing. I guess I think I can explain Scully's because she's used to the military, so she kind of understands what soldiers and sailors and so on have to deal with. So I thought that was interesting. That kind of was kind of cool. Anyway, what would you give this one out of 10?
I think I'd give this one a 7. I thought some of the writing, like that, like you say, if it was intentional with the backstory of Scully, the way that she approaches the kind of military authority, then I thought that was some really nice little points in this. But other than that, it did, like you say, touch on previous episodes.
I think I'll give this one. I liked a lot of it. I liked some of the. I like Rappo for. I thought the acting in that guy was really good. He was convincingly rage-filled, and it kind of worked for me. And I also like the writing around the general. I could have done a bit more of the old Mulder and Scully banter. Actually, a bit more of that would have been kind of fun. Yeah, I thought it was okay. I'd give it 6 out of 10 personally. So we're not too far apart there. Okay, let's have a little musical break and get on to the next episode.
Every breath you take, and every move you make, every bond you break, every step you take, I'll be watching you. Every single day, and every word you say, every game you play, every night you stay, I'll be watching you. Oh, can't you see? You belong to me. How my poor heart aches with every step you take, every move you make, every vow you break, every smile you fake, every claim you stake, I'll be watching you. Since you've gone, I've been lost without a trace. I dream at night, I can only see your face. I look around, but it's you I can't replace. I feel so cold and I long for your embrace. I keep crying, baby, baby, please.
Okay, so episode 8 of season 3, Oublié. An oublié is like a French term for a dungeon or a prison cell where a prisoner is just thrown into and left, not fed or watered, just left to die. It's pretty horrible. Directed by Kim Manners, written by Charles Grant Craig, and first aired on November the 17th, 1995. What was your thoughts on this one, Becky?
This one was very emotive, very tense, and I thought it was, even though it was quite dark, it handled it very well.
Yeah, it was. I thought it was very sophisticated and well done. I thought it could have easily gone even a little bit exploitative, but it completely avoided that while covering some pretty harsh ground. Actually,
Yeah.
it's about the abduction of a young girl by someone who basically, in the past, has imprisoned girls for years on end. We find that out through the episode, and it's kind of hard. As it goes on, it gets harder and harder to sort of deal with, actually, as a viewer. It starts with a schoolgirl having a picture taken, as a set of school pictures, and we get a creepy assistant who's like kind of not leering at the girl, kind of, and then later on we see him developing her picture, cutting it out, and then pasting it into like a montage with himself, like they're a couple, and it's kind of grim. And then straight after we see him with a stocking over his face, sort of abduct the girl. Her little sister is in the same room, sees this abduction, and he says the phrase, "Nobody's going to spoil us." And meanwhile, in another place, there's a waitress who's like obviously having a bad day. She suddenly gets a nosebleed, then falls on the floor, has a seizure, and she's muttering over and over again, "Nobody's going to spoil us," which creates this psychic kind of connection between the two. and Mulder and Scully rock up. It's not clear why really they're involved in this, is it? But I mean, they are. That's how it is. And from the scene, that they also go to the scene of the kidnapping. They get a bit of hair and fibre samples, but unfortunately no prints. And there's a blood on the floor, and the dad says that's because she had she was subject to nosebleeds sometimes, and that she had a nosebleed during the kidnapping. So they take a sample of blood. They then go find this waitress that's had these same phrase and look into it, and it turns out this waitress was also abducted herself when she was 8 and kept for 5 years in a dark cell, it would appear. Obviously gone terrible event in her life, and one she's been struggling to get over with. And I think Mulder makes the point that it's a wonder she can function at all with what happened to her. Mulder's very sympathetic in this, and at one point actually Scully sort of intimates, what happened to his sister is what's driving him in this one, and he's kind of angry at this. He says not everything is about my sister. He's kind of, I think he's tired with Scully thinking of it in terms of his sister, when in fact it's just human empathy. That comes off of Mulder quite strongly in this. Do you feel?
Definitely, and he seems to read people in a completely different way to Scully. She is relying on the evidence, and the evidence has implicated the woman, the previous victim, in the crime, potentially because she had her blood and the victim's blood on her, even though she was witnessed by several people to being all the way across town at the time when the girl was abducted. Yeah. She's following the facts, but Mulder straight away tries to get that emotional. Well, he does. He really does have an emotional connection with this woman. Yeah,
she's at one point Mulder says, I think there's a connection, but not in the way you think there is. He says when he's talking to Lucy to try and persuade her to possibly help, it's kind of really sad, because Lucy, she just wants to forget everything, all of that happened to her, and she doesn't want to help because she doesn't want to be involved with that kind of situation ever again, even if it's the case of just helping someone escape it. She just doesn't want anything to do. At one point she actually says the phrase, I think Mulder says, if you're experiencing something or other, but she says, I've experienced just about everything once or twice. It's all very temporary, which kind of indicates how detached she wants to remain from everything. It's really sad. It rings true. That kind of dialogue feels like a genuine, sad case of this kind. There's one bit of this where the kidnapper is obviously on his way to taking the girl somewhere, but he's just looking in the trunk. We don't see in the trunk. It's kind of an interesting thing because it adds to the tension. He's just smiling and looking down in the trunk. But he's got a flat tyre. And then like a repair guy, a breakdown truck, pulls up. He shuts the boot, turns round, and the guy offers to help him, for $10. And he's saying, no, I don't need any help. But then he starts getting violent. And also at one point he actually says, we're all right. He doesn't say, I'm all right. He says, we're all right. Did you catch that one?
I did. And I thought it was interesting. And this character, and the guy who plays him, I thought was great. And he constantly, we don't know what he's going to do next. He's... particularly when he loses control, which we can see here, and that is where the episode kind of treads that line of being very dark but doesn't become exploitative, like you said before. It kind of hints at things, and some of the phrasing, I think later on through the psychic connection, Lucy says to Mulder, he hasn't touched her yet. He can't at the moment. You think, nothing seen, nothing exploitative, but that one line is just so horrible. Yeah.
We do see at one point Lucy wakes up with a scratched face saying she can't see, and we see that Amy's suffering the same thing. So that for us as the audience, we get the psychic connection established. I have to say that the acting throughout this was really good. The waitress, the little girl, was played by Jill State. Really, really well acted. Jill State was 13 when she did this. It was really well acted. And also the guy who was the sort of vacant, vacuous, dead-eyed bad guy. I think he was really good. I can't recall seeing him in anything else. He reminds me a bit of the disgraced actor Jeffrey Jones. We won't go into that, but he reminded me a bit of Jeffrey Jones. He had that kind of look about him too. Jeffrey Jones was the guy that played the principal in Ferris Bueller, if that helps anyone out there. And as I say, Jewel State was really good in this. She reminded me a lot of Linda Blair in The Exorcist. She had that sort of innocence, sort of about her, and she had real presence as well. And I liked the fact that the whole Lucy not being very reluctant to help felt very genuine to me. And it was kind of sad, wasn't it? It was really sad.
It was, and it very kind of, I mean, obviously this, apart from the psychic connection, it's a very real, gritty episode, and just that sense of, there's no escaping your own mind, your own demons, your own trauma, whatever. And the fact that, a self-preservation and her trying to survive afterwards, to go back into that is going to drag her, back so much mentally. And it's a huge sacrifice. So you can understand why she wouldn't want to help.
Yeah. Then we get this deal where the girl Amy is like in the dark, and the man comes in and starts taking pictures of her. She's completely dressed in a like a nightie that starts at her neck downwards. So there's nothing exploitative about this scene in that sense. However, there's a man in the dark. She can't really see because because he's using a flash camera to take pictures of her, and we get this noise of the camera whirring up, and then bam, the flash, whirring up, bam, the flash, and she's like saying, "Mister, why are you doing this?" And oh man, it's grim. It's really grim. But there's nothing physical happens other than he's taking pictures in the dark. It's kind of, I found it hard going, honestly.
Yeah. Extremely suggestive.
And after, I think just a little after that, we see Mulder watching video of the waitress Lucy when she was found. She was in prison from 8 to 13 and was extremely photosensitive because she'd been kept in the dark for 5 years. So we can that suggests that this is not like something this girl's going to suffer for a day. It's going to be for years. Which again is horrific. Then they find out the school photos went out to everyone except Amy, which leads them back to the photographer thing, and the assistant has been fired the day after. They don't establish, I think, why he was fired, but he was fired the day after, so there's something dodgy going on there. And that gives them a photo of the guy in a lead, and also his medical history. They find he was bipolar. And they show the picture to both Amy's sister and Lucy. I don't think they comment about Amy's sister, actually, after that. I can't remember them saying, oh, yeah, they got to confirm. They show, Mulder finds Lucy and wants to show the picture, and he basically, she's not interested, is she? She goes, I'm not interested in this, I don't care. And Mulder says something like, "But you're a best hope." And she says, "If I'm a best hope, she's in a lot more trouble than you think." She really doesn't want to get involved. And then Mulder tries to restrain her. He grabs her arm, and she says, "Don't touch me. I don't like being touched." Again, completely genuine. That feels totally 100% authentic to me.
Yeah.
And then she actually says, I was doing that okay until all this started. He shows her the photo. She doesn't, I don't know, I couldn't quite read this. She didn't seem to react. But then Mulder says, "You recognise him, don't you?" And she runs away. And then we get a mirroring, don't we? As she's running, Amy manages to escape from the hut, with the girl manages to escape from the dark place, and she starts running away through unfortunately, all she's got is a nightgown. I don't think she's got anything on her feet, and it's this like leafy, stumpy wood, wet leaves. And Amy's doing the same. Lucy's doing the same as Amy. And then we get the guy hunted down. It's really grim, and she falls over and hurts her arm. And again, Jewel State really conveys that really well. You feel the pain.
Yeah.
It's kind of grim. And then she has to beg the guy for water. and she's thirsty. She says, "Please, mister, give me a drink." And he just, there's no empathy there. He just kind of pours it down her throat. She's choking, but she's thirsty, so she's trying to. It's really it's forceful and it's horrible, non-exploitative, but it's terrible.
Yeah.
It's a grim episode, this. Merry Christmas, everyone. Anyway, they go to a place, they track down an address, and they go to a place, they find a girl in the basement in the dark. And it turns out to be Lucy, the waitress. This surprised me. I've seen this episode before, but I couldn't remember this bit. It was kind of a nice surprise. Not nice, but it was kind of well constructed surprise, wasn't it? And she can't explain how she got there or anything like that. And basically, the guy knows he's been tracked down. He's dragged the girl to open water, and he's trying to drown her, isn't he? And from what Lucy says, Mulder and Scully realised this, so they start heading for the nearest open water. And we get the guy just drowning this young girl. And they shoot him and pull her out, and they try and resuscitate her. But then we see Lucy kind of drowning in the car, but then she gets better. Basically, Lucy dies, and the girl who appears to have died comes back to life. And they find water in Lucy's the waitress's lungs, 5 litres of water. And we get this moment where Mulder goes to Lucy's body and he starts to weep, doesn't he?
Yeah.
And then they confirm later, Amy doesn't appear to have even a cut. So Mulder basically says he believes Lucy died for Amy, to give her a chance, but maybe it was just the only way she'd forget about what happened to her. So this life, it was kind of cool, this life for a life business. Again, reminded me, but in a completely different way, of The Exorcist. Someone decided to sacrifice himself to help a young girl.
Yeah, and that kind of religious aspect as well, how all of, not only through the drowning, but all of the abrasions appear on Lucy as opposed to Amy right at the end. But it's just so sad that she never could escape what happened to her, to the point of, she could help this girl. Obviously, she dies so she can live, but there's just no escaping that darkness and that past and that trauma, which is a really, really dark, horrible thought.
It's terrible. This goes kind of back to the final girl theory somewhat, doesn't it? In a fairly mature look at that, of basically you never get over something like this.
Yeah.
You're always going to suffer in one way or another. And I think it's Lucy. Lucy is the heart of this episode. That actress who played the role she wasn't trying to elicit anyone's sympathy. It wasn't acted or even indeed written to be a sympathetic character, was she? She was a victim who was just trying to not get engaged anymore, but kind of been dragged back in one more time. I really thought this episode was a great one, but a very grim one. So I enjoyed it a lot. Any final thoughts on this one?
Just say that I thought that it was incredibly well written, both in terms of the story, but also the characters, particularly Lucy. And that's even more evident when, discussing it in comparison to the more recent episodes, and, the kind of plethora of characters that weren't that fleshed out. It was really great writing, and really, like you've touched on, multiple times, the actual dialogue was very, very truthful, I thought. Yeah,
it felt like almost like a case study.
Yeah.
It just felt like completely genuine. I'm sure whoever wrote this either knew their stuff or did a lot of research to know their stuff. Some of those lines felt like a real person had said them, not, the usual dramatic dialogue kind of stuff. And it's episodes like this that really set up the X-Files as a precursor to those more realistic investigative shows that, abound now. And before now, from this episode on, I feel that this is one of the top ones of that kind. And again, it's like a precursor to Millennium. It's kind of that vibe. So lots of good things about this episode, but not one you could hand on heart say, I really enjoyed it. It was one you could really appreciate, but it was terribly sad, I think, is one way to put it. What would you give this out of 10?
I think I'd have to give this one a 9.
Yeah, I agree. It's a 9. It's clearly one of the best episodes of this season so far. And it's a grim one. It has to be said. It is a grim one, as some of the others were in this set. We definitely hitting a grim section, aren't we? In these.
Yeah.
Okay, let's wind out there. I've just got one thing to say, actually, one thing to add. I have a new book out about the X-Files. It's called X-Files Episode by Episode Season 1. It's kind of me looking at Season 1 one at a time, discussing it. And it's kind of a work of love. I kind of love the X-Files, as you listeners have probably gathered from the way we talk about it. What I've done is I've sort of broken it down. I'm reiterating a lot of what I've done in the podcasts, in fact, but in a sort of, obviously, just written it down and put it in a nice order. And I talk a lot about the cultural influences, and some of which I haven't talked about in episodes. So there is some new stuff in there. And I'm very glad to say that Rebecca joined me by writing an introduction for me, which is kind of cool.
Yep, thank you very much.
And it's available now, and as a sort of a little Christmas gift, is also available for free from Kindle from the 20th to the 24th of December of 2016. So you people listen to this podcast in like a week's time. Sorry you missed your chance, but it is going to still be dirt cheap on Kindle. The best way to get it is go to our website, www.thegoodthebadandtheodd.com, and find the link to books. If you don't want to do that, you can search for it in the Kindle store on Amazon for Mark Cain, Cain, and just add the word X-Files, and you should be able to find it. As I say, it's free for 5 days, then it's going to be dirt cheap after that. And if you buy it, you will be supporting the podcast, so that'd be kind of cool. Right, so enough of the sales pitch. Thanks for joining me today, Becky. It's been a real pleasure, as always, even though these were particularly dark episodes, weren't they?
Well, I've been watching this ahead, and I'll tell you now, we're in for some treats. That's all I'm going to say. It's going to light up a lot.
Yeah, you couldn't wait, could you? I've got out of the habit. I try not to watch ahead now. I'll wait until we've talked about it, because I start getting confused, and it's like it makes the podcast worse. So I like to sort of keep on top of that. I suspect we won't be back until after Christmas now for the next one, but we'll see how it goes. But don't forget the book. There'll be a link to it in the show notes for this episode too, so no excuses, and it's on Amazon worldwide, and it's free, as I say, for 5 days. In fact, all my books are free for those 5 days, so if you want to pick up the Quatermass book, say, go ahead with that too. Merry Christmas. But just do me a favour, if you like them, if you could leave me a nice review, that would be great. Okay, then, let's wind it up there. So, again, thanks, Becky.
Thank you.
And remember, they're watching.